Good day, my name is Piet Kroukamp. I'm from the Northwest University, and I'm also affiliated to the Business School of the University. I believe today's conversation is both timely and important as we move closer to the local government elections on the 4th of November. The issues we will be discussing today are likely to become even more relevant and significant. Joining us today is well-known freelance journalist Juanita Hunter. She will moderate the discussion. We are also pleased to welcome Michael Beaumont. Perhaps we can add the more controversial Michael Beaumont nowadays. National Chairperson of Action South Africa, and then, of course, the Provincial Convenor of the Economic Freedom Fighters Youth Command in the Northwest. And for purposes of academic sanity, I've invited Professor Ntsikelelo breakfast of the Nelson Mandela University. The discussion of today will be distributed through various university websites, shared across social media platforms, and feature in my weekly newsletter, allowing it to reach a rather broad audience. A warm welcome to our panelists and to everyone joining us today, as well as those who will be joining the conversation as it unfolds. Juanita, over to you. Thanks a lot for being here and being willing to participate.
Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you very much to the panelists as well as the guests that are with us now. Good afternoon, I believe it is. Michael, Peter, you are controversial. I thought you'd use that term for me. I think I'm the most controversial of all of us here today, given what's been happening on social media over the last 7 days. But I think we are really, really fortunate to be having this conversation, and the timeliness is important because I was thinking about something quite deeply this week about the importance of centering constitutional democracy in our conversations around politics. And sometimes we forget that, because sometimes we kind of, we see politics as the end, not the tool and the means to the end, right? And so when it comes to the act of voting, it's the tool that allows for the constitutional democracy, but the constitutional democracy is not, the sum of it is not voting alone.
Yeah.
So, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I reply to Dorothy.
Are we all clear? All right. Okay, so I'm gonna continue with that. So in the last week, we obviously saw this manifestation of public protest. And so when I asked the president about it the day after, on July 1st, about what he made of it, and he said it was citizens taking up their right to constitutional right to freedom of expression and to protest. And I thought about that for a while, compounded with the fact that I got a lot of attack for calling March and March a vigilante group, right? And I thought about the idea of political actors and political expression and how voting is ultimately the highest form of political expression. It's not the last form of political expression, but it's one of the most important forms of political expression, right? And so is protesting and not voting a good use of your constitutional democracy, or voting and not protesting a good use of your constitutional democracy? These are the thoughts that have come to my mind. So with that premise, we'll get straight into the conversation. I want to start with Professor Breakfast. Thank you very much again for joining us. So let's start here. What is your analysis in terms of why would young people come out to protest but not vote? Or or does that binary not exist?
Yeah, I think that binary does exist. Interestingly, there's a study which I did, I can't remember when it was, whereby I examined at close range the issue of youth political apathy. And when you deconstruct the concept, because there's a difference at a conceptual level between youth political apathy and voter apathy, and sometimes we tend to use the two concepts interchangeably, which is fundamentally wrong. because political apathy is a broad concept, and voter apathy is a very narrow concept because it focuses on voting. So what I found was that a lot of young people, they think that the struggle is over and they have a neoliberal outlook to life because withdrawing from politics is an expression of individualism. And, you know, during the Cold War, I think because we had two ideological pillars, namely capitalism and socialism, so young people were able to gravitate either way, whether to the left or to the right. But in the early 90s, people started to foreground this concept of a lost generation, because interestingly, in 1994, voter turnout amongst young people was very high. And the issue of voter political apathy started in 1999, where young people started to withdraw from politics. But of late, I've had a change of heart because I think that there is no youth political apathy, but there's voter apathy. Because if you look at the violent service delivery protests, they are normally driven by young people. If you look at the fees must fall, it was engineered by young people. If you look at the Arab Spring, it was started by young people. In the US of late, we saw protests organized by young people in opposition to what is happening in Palestine. But also the issue of voter apathy, we can interpret it as also a sign of protest in opposition to social discontentment of young people against unemployment, poverty, and inequality. I think there is a strong nexus between voter turnout and service delivery. I think people, when they are not getting the services that they need, they tend to withdraw from political engagement.
Thank you very much. Michael, you've been a player in the political space for a long time. And so this lens in which you look at the youth vote, what is the diagnosis that you see as to why young people are not engaging with democracy, one, and then not voting, two?
Well, I think, Quinita, when you look at young people, I think they feel a huge disconnect between themselves and their political system. They see the system, they understand it. There's not a lack of knowledge or a lack of care in terms of appreciating how it works. But there is a very strong sense that it's operating out there. It's being operated by people who are old enough to be my grandparents, and it's not operating to my benefit. And I think a lot of young people have just said, you know, to hell with this. You know, we're not going to waste our time participating in a process that is so far removed from my realities. And they go about their ordinary everyday lives in a way that, you know, doesn't seek to be connected to the system. Well, that's not universal for all young people. I'm quite glad to say that the average age of an ActionSA member is under 40 years old. So certainly, you know, some parties appeal to young people more than others. But there is another dimension I think we need to talk about when we talk about youth voting, because there has become a strange misnomer that has developed in the minds of particularly young people to say that I'm going to punish these politicians by not going out to vote. Like that is a way of dealing with their anger and their discontent. And it's a fundamental mistake, because government is going to be formed, whether you vote or not. The only question is whether that government will in some way represent you or not at all, because you didn't cast your vote and express yourself. And it's hugely important that we address that misnomer. You know, we must also understand that a political system and political parties are not perfect. No one looks at a political party, or rather, should I say, very few, and say this party is absolutely perfect and this one is absolutely terrible. And in many ways, political choice has been mistakenly characterized as a binary. You're either this or you're that, when in real terms, it's much more of a spectrum where I feel warm to this party and hot towards that party, or, you know, cold or ice cold. to a political party based on how I connect with them. And on that basis, there's probably 2 or 3 different political parties that a voter would be open to voting for before they go to the polls. And we need people to understand that politics and political parties and politicians are far from perfect. I think they know that. But really, they need to go and cast their vote, even if it is for a party that isn't perfect, that has deficiencies in their opinion, but that is better than the status quo. Because this is the part that we need to address, and we're very strong in it from our political messaging point of view. If we always vote the way we've always voted, we're always going to suffer the way we've always suffered. We're 32 years into our democracy. Changing your vote from one party to another can't be controversial. It can't be seen as a loyalty issue or anything like that. I think that's one of the great things about younger generations is they don't feel that they owe anyone anything, which I think is great. And we need to apply that to our voting choices. But change can only come from doing something different. If you just take a look at this GNU that came into effect in May 2024, it was the result of voters taking away, in the strongest terms, a majority from single party rule. And yet, economically and in the key KPIs of the country, nothing is changing. Right now, South Africa has the highest unemployment it has ever had. And young people are the greatest victims of that epidemic and the failure of imagination of people in national government to do something different. And this is why the message has got to go out there and say, go and vote, participate, and do something different if you want something different to happen.
All right. And so, Masego, if you can hear us and you are online, let's talk about, young people for a second. So there's two things that captured my mind globally, right? 2 phenomena. The first phenomenon is the Gen Z protest that we saw in Nepal, we saw Bangladesh, we saw in Africa, it was most prominent in Madagascar, and in Morocco a little bit, and we saw some iterations of it in Kenya, right? So I had went down a little bit of a rabbit hole in trying to understand this Gen Z protest, because it seemed to be very different to what we saw more than a decade ago now with the Arab Spring protest, right? And Prof, you can correct me, right? The idea with the Gen Z protest is that we are not favoring one political party over another. So in the protests in Tunisia, in Egypt, is we don't want Hosni Mubarak, we want Morsi, for example, right? But the Gen Z protest is there was a sense of politics represented, or political elite represented, was the reason for the indignity that the young people were suffering. So down with the entire movement, right? And so you kind of saw, let's topple it all, and not in favor of one political interest or the other. I found that to be interesting. The second phenomenon that has captured my mind globally when it comes to young people, Masego, is the election of Zohran Mamdani as the mayor of New York, right? And the ability to change, to have an unthinkable electoral outcome to a democratic socialist on the basis of getting people to turn out, getting young people to turn out. So I'm not sure if Masego, if you are on the line, I don't see she's on screen now. You can chime in when she's joined. But Prof, let me take this to you. Can you weigh in on these 2 phenomena as it relates to South Africa?
What is your question? Sorry, I missed your question.
So for me, what I'm trying to understand is, you see this global trend of Gen Z protests, yes, where it's not it's not the politics of a better devil. So it's not Herman Mashaba versus Helen Ziller, right? They're all crap. Sorry for my language, right? On one hand. And then you also have this other element where you had a successful story of a young candidate emerging on the basis that they got young people to vote. So is it then a question of who is contending, who are the political players that will determine whether or not, or how Gen Z or young people actually participate in politics? Am I making sense?
Yes, you are. I think on the continent, we've seen an interesting phenomenon developing. We've seen young people becoming impatient of older politicians who are falling short of getting the job done. We've seen that in Kenya, young people taking the concept of popular sovereignty into their own hands, demanding accountability. Now that is an antithesis of political apathy. When young people take to the street in opposition to a slow pace of service delivery, when young people protest against inequality, poverty, unemployment, that is not youth political apathy. Youth political apathy, to me, is political disengagement, which is an antithesis of a democracy. So I think, young people do take their sense of agency seriously. But I think what is happening is the fact that they are, as the colleague indicated in the beginning, that they are trying to punish the older politicians who are failing to promote development for the majority by staying away from the polls. Now, the problem with that is that even if you don't vote, someone else is going to vote for you, because at the end of the day, or after all, you are going to have a government, so you might as well vote. So I think the strategy that is used by young people to showcase their social discontentment is off the mark, because one of the hallmarks of democracy is public participation, and an election is one of the ingredients of public participation. But also I've come across research that showcases that when people withdraw from public participation, corruption tends to flourish, because public participation is one of the control measures over the political elite. So it's important that young people become actively involved in the political space, but they don't only vote and then disappear and then come back every time there is an election cycle. But they vote, but in between, they go to their wards, they demand answers, they give mandate to their councillors so that they can be able to raise their issues at the council.
Yeah, so Michael, when we all look at what happened in New York, obviously this big moment a year ago, and you see a shift in young people getting more engaged with politics, because you have this very young and robust representative, right? What is the South African Mamdani movement?
Well, I think you're asking someone who's profoundly biased, so I'm going to say ActionSA straight. But let me do it in a bit more of an honest way, to say that even from our point of view, we have a long way to go in that regard. I think we recognize the disconnect between young people and politics. We think that we've done certain things that are starting to appeal to young people in that regard.
Like what, Michael?
Well, it's about tackling the issues of greatest importance that they're dealing with, because where I struggle to accept parallels being drawn between New York and South Africa is when you look at the lived realities of young people in South Africa. It's going to take a hell of a lot more than a charismatic candidate who connects with young people on an emotional level. It's got to take someone who can actually convince young people that their plans are going to change their lived realities. And the lived reality of a young South African is generally unemployed, generally without a pathway towards economic prosperity or freedom of any kind, and generally living in communities where there's high degrees of violence and people are dependent on the state. From that point of view, that is the lived realities of young people, and that's where the comparison to places like New York falls apart, because those things have to be addressed. And I think ultimately, this is where we face a particular challenge. We're approaching a local government election, and we're working very hard to get people excited about the idea of local government. But in real terms, those realities that I'm talking about require national government solutions, and they aren't coming to the fore. We are 2 years into a government of national unity, and even if you look at it in the most generous form, there are not changes coming down the pipeline that can be pointed to and said, that can cause us to believe that there's going to be improvements in our lives to address these serious challenges that we are facing. So yes, as parties, we have a long way to go. I think even in the way we talk, the candidates we put forward, there's got to be more work to ensure that young people can find their place in political parties. I mean, you take the example of what went on in the South African Parliament just a couple of days ago. Dina Pule being sworn in as the Minister of Social Development, disgraced as a minister. And you've got to imagine young people looking at the situation saying, surely in a country of young South Africans with as much talent as we have, this can't be the answer to how we lead government. Surely young people have got to have a place at the table. I think that's another thing political parties have to do. They have to ensure that young people can take their rightful place in leadership. It's not about creating space for them as a handout. That's not the right attitude towards young people. It's about making sure that space is created for them to take their rightful place in leadership, both in a political party and in government.
Masego, when your party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, was launched 2013, it was very audacious and deliberate about the fact that it's targeting the youth. You had a youthful commander-in-chief, and if you track demographics of vote patterns, 2014 and since then, it was obviously very much targeted at young people. And so the question then comes is that, does the EFF still play that role as, the party for the youth? And then, if that's the case, do you shoulder the responsibility of why young people are actually not coming out to vote? Masego? Okay. She seems to be frozen again. I'm going to keep it moving just in the interest of time. Prof, if you back and we can take it to your end, right? Let's talk about the representation of parties, right? Average age of politicians in a political spectrum. We can't hear you, Masego. So the average age of politicians, you're looking at, 50s, 60s, some parties older than others. The Democratic Alliance had their Congress and majority of their top leadership under the age of 45, a good sign in terms of generational change, right? My question then comes in as to what and who must create this pipeline of leadership to say, it just doesn't, you don't just wake up one day and there are young people standing to be mayors and councillors. There has to be some sort of development process or pipeline. How do you solve for that?
Well,
All right.
Sorry.
Prof, I'm gonna pause you. We didn't hear from Masego. Masego, I asked you about your party and the responsibility your party has in getting people out to vote, and if you can answer the last question as well, that would be wonderful.
All right. Yeah, I sort of captured the last part of the question, but I'll try because I'm struggling with network. These are one of the reasons why we need to unseat the government. But anyway, one of the fundamental things that the EFF that we are still doing is to make sure that we do not lose touch with young people, and that's why we do have a movement, a wing of young people as the Youth Command in the EFF. So one of the things we've invested in is civic education, and that's why also the EFF members in Parliament have introduced the Private Members Bill, where we're saying that young people who are eligible to vote, they must be automatically registered. So we're trying to bridge the bureaucracy between young people and the system. And also we're trying to expose young people to genuine leadership positions by the wing we've just established as the Youth Command. So we're trying, Ms. Hunter, to make sure that the EFF does not lose touch with young people, and that's why we're also advocating for insourcing of security guards, insourcing of cleaners, because mostly it's young people who are occupying those positions. So we're really trying to make sure that as the EFF we do not lose touch of our voters. But one of the important things that we're trying to do through this strengthening of democracy is that we are also actively involved in speaking to young people and encouraging them to register to vote. So we are the only political party that is very loud and that is very invested in making sure that young people of this country must appear on the voters' roll as they are the future of this country. I'm not sure if I'm still audible because I don't see. Oh, okay. All right. No, thank you. So we are trying to solve this issue of voter apathy because we don't really believe that young people should just be frustrated and not participate because that will be a fruitless exercise of the democracy. So we really believe that young people should be encouraged to be supported in ways in like the government, for instance, if I can give an example, they should focus on labor intensive industries, as the EFF has been saying. They must make sure that we are employed. They must not tell us like what Gwede said the other time, saying we're lazy. We're not lazy. We're studying, but after we study, those opportunities, our education does not translate into job opportunities. So that thing really frustrates us a lot. Thank you very much. I hope I'm still audible because I'm really struggling with network.
One quick question. From what I saw this last week in the March movement, etc., do you still think the EFF is relevant among young people? Okay, so she's frozen, but we'll keep the conversation moving, right? Michael, let's take it a little bit further now, right? I have an unpopular view, and that unpopular view is that opposition politics or negative campaigning does not work to get people out to vote. So for example, the DA has been playing that tactic against the ANC for years and years and years. Don't vote for them, vote for us. Like they are bad, they are bad, they are bad. That's not enough of a mobilizer to get people out. Is there a way that we can change that to say there's almost like a positive campaigning message, or like I'm trying to understand that the type of politics that we've seen is not giving us that outcome of getting people out to vote and dealing with that political apathy that Prof spoke about. What can be an alternative?
Well, I think this is where you've got to understand that political parties are not different from businesses in that way, in that they respond to consumers. So if the consumers are the ones saying, we don't want to see this kind of campaigning, we want to see positive campaigning, and consumers, and using this extended metaphor for voters, are the ones saying, we are only going to reward political parties who campaign on a solutions-based platform, then political parties will respond to that. Ultimately, political parties that do respond will gain support. The ones that don't will lose support. And I think this is where, again, it's so important for voters generally, and young people specifically, to understand their own individual agency in this regard, and the powers they have to drive the behavior of political parties and their political establishment more broadly. Again, going back to our earlier part of this conversation, this is where the act of not voting doesn't help, because the act of not voting just means that a minority of people in our country are now driving the decisions around how governments are formed, and they seem to be responding to negative campaigning in the way in which they are voting. So if all the people who want solutions-based campaigning are not voting, and all the people who are happy with the negative campaigning are voting, then that's what political parties will respond to. But really, from a party political point of view, and perhaps let me offer you some insights in the belly of the beast, so to speak. We learned through our market research and our understanding that voter choice is not a binary. It's not an on and off switch, not either this or that. But parties, voters are inclined towards particular political parties or disinclined towards them in various degrees. And often when a person goes to the poll, they might vote for party A, but they might still like party B or C. And from that point of view, it is really important that you foster those voting intentions over time. Even if you don't get people voting for you in a particular election, that doesn't mean all of that capital is lost, and you can build it in future elections and perhaps become their first choice of party. But as you say, it is important to offer a solutions-based platform. Now, another insight from a political party is that in the South African context, it's very difficult to completely avoid negative campaigning. You've got to understand, in a country where a president will appoint Dina Pule, going back to my earlier example, as a Minister of Social Development, you can't sit there as a political party and say, this is wonderful news, or try and suggest that it isn't as bad as it seems. It is, and it needs to be called out. And the frank reality is that our broken political establishment produces 5 or 6 pieces of news as disconcerting as that every single day. And as a political party, you can't not be engaged in that conversation. But what is important is that when you engage in that conversation, negative campaigning or negative commentary on these things still goes hand in hand with a solutions-based platform. Because every one of those major news stories, which are often negative in nature, and if you don't mind me offering you a piece of constructive criticism, Quinita, your industry covers negative news much more than positive news. I can call a press conference today to announce an economic solution. I promise you I won't get journalists to come to that press conference. But if I call a press conference to announce I'm laying criminal charges against the president, you'll all be there. And that's another kind of piece of insight that we should probably engage around at some point, even if now's not the platform. But it is important.
But it's a valid point, because it also sort of applies to us, because we have news aversion, right? So you have voter apathy, and then you have news aversion that our industry faces. And I think that probably it's like despair begetting despair. Like it's just a loop of despair. And I've been thinking really hard of, like, if you shift the attention from the breakers to the fixers, what will that do in terms of our ecosystem, and what does that do for democracy as well? So it's a very valid point, Michael.
Well, it's not even a dynamic that's just unique to South Africa. It's all around the world. I mean, I know that I can't remember the exact details of when it was. As a journalist, I'm sure you will. There have been times where people have come out with news platforms that are only going to focus on good news and positive things, and they all failed because ultimately South Africans live in a difficult reality. And if the media outlets are just going to tell stories about rainbows and kittens, it's going to be disconnected from their reality. So from that point of view, it is a challenge for both of our industries. But what is important is we find ways to attach solutions to our commentary around the problem, so that even when people are despairing about something that is in a poor state, there is still an idea around how it could be better.
Prof, let's talk about the theme of solutions, right? I mean, there's an interesting piece of news that sort of didn't capture too much of attention. I think it was last week. The EFF leader, Julius Malema, proposing an electoral matters amendment bill to introduce automatic voter registration in South Africa, where you use population data to automatically register eligible voters. And he says this is to address low voter registration and, as a result, low voter turnout, right? The technicalities of it, first of all, it's not going to immediately solve this elections problem, the upcoming November one, because it will take time. And the technicalities, I'm not sure what that will look like. But let's think about what are creative solutions to deal with this low voter turnout, this apathy that persists.
Yeah, interestingly, of late, I've been reading the work of Manuel Castells, the Spanish scholar, who foregrounded the concept of network theory, which is basically a shift from industrialization to information age or digitization, that social media is also a space of power. So power of late has been diffused. So I think the media space also needs to be used, because most of the young people have a strong footprint in that space. I think the traditional media, I'm sorry to say this, I hope that you don't take this to heart, has been overtaken by the social media space. So I think the message needs to be pitched strongly to young people on that platform, which is the social media platform. But also it's very easy to mobilize young people on social media than employing traditional approaches like arranging a rally, making young people to come together and so on. So I think we need to move with the times because society has evolved. Of course, we can use a hybridization approach, you know, a mixture of older approaches with the new ones, so that we keep up with the new trends of society. But also, it's going to be very difficult to make young people to pitch at the polling stations on a large scale if politicians are not rendering services to them. And that speaks to the issue that I brought up in the beginning, which is the strong nexus between service delivery and voter turnout. People don't vote just for fun. They vote because they want their lives to change for the better. Therefore, the leaders that are elected, they need to do their work and give services to the people, and not shift the blame and put it on young people that they are a lost generation. So I think if our leaders can get the job done in government, it will be easy then to untwist young people to take democracy seriously. Because one of the problems with lower voter turnout is that it begs the question about the issue of legitimacy. When you have people who have not voted on a large scale, I think that has a symbolic meaning, you know, because it begs the question whether the democratic outcomes, do they reflect the will of the people if only a tiny minority of people have voted.
Masego, when you before you dropped out, I asked you the question in terms of is the EFF still relevant as the voice of young people, or is it just another player in the political ecosystem which the youth feel disengaged from?
Right. I hope now I won't go off. I'm audible, right?
You are.
Okay. Yeah. So the EFF is still the vanguard of young people. Raised anytime soon. I think if you look at our members in parliament, if you look at our members in municipal councils, you'll see that representation is mostly young people, and we are not apologetic about that. We make sure that young people have a genuine representation into parliament, into councils. And some of our policy positions have also shaped the broader political discussions, you know, even when they are not fully adopted. I mean, you've been talking about automated voter registration, which was which came with the EFF. So we're still trying to influence our own policies that are youth driven into government. But also we are very vocal about young people participating in economy. We're really vocal about that, and also we feel like if the cake is much more bigger, then we won't be fighting for smaller yana crumbs. So what we are still as the EFF saying that for us to have a long-term solution, we still need to talk about the land reform. We need to address youth employment seriously. We need to make sure that the education system, or rather education it translates into jobs. It does not mean that when I'm graduated now I can't go and get a job somewhere. So we're still trying to do that, and we're still trying to advocate, not really trying, we are advocating for ownership as young people. So we did not in the recent I don't know, they're saying I must maybe switch off my camera, maybe so that my
and we can hear you better. I think that will be easier.
Okay, is it better? Okay,
Masego,
yeah. So I think in the recent elections, the EFF did not achieve the level of electoral growth we expected, but was still trying to push with our 9%. Was still trying to push policies that are youth based. Yeah, so I was just I'm sorry about that. I was just distracted by messages that were getting on my phone.
No worries.
Yeah.
So the reality is that those talking points about youth participation in the economy, land, all of these things, these were hot topics 2014, 16, 19, right?
Yes,
We now
yes.
in a world where you've since the arrival of that politics, 2014 upwards, there's been a deterioration in terms of the economic situation as well as the compounding of youth unemployment. So the situation has only gotten worse for young people, not any better, right? So when I look at what happened this week at in the March and March protests, right? Is that not a manifestation of the youth or younger people saying, one, falling for the scapegoating of foreign nationals as the cause of this economic ruin, one, and then the second part of it is finding expression outside of formal politics, if you like. And I might be wrong, both Prof and Michael, of whether you think March and March falls in the realm of organized politics or not. But I'm seeing some sort of moving on, that those talking points of, or that we need the land, we kind of past that now. I don't know, maybe Prof, you can start, and then Michael, you can pick up.
Okay, should I weigh in?
You can, Prof.
Cool, sure. Yeah. I think now the debate is getting heated. I think we're barking at the wrong tree, because part of me thinks that on the one hand, people have a right to express their social discontentment through protest. That is within their right. The Constitution accords them that right. But on the other hand, I think we don't have a social contract with a civil society. If civil society organizations would like to make a change for the better, and they want to use the state machinery, they need to do that via democratic means, which is contesting the political space. I don't think that civil society organizations can give an order to foreign nationals that they need to abide by this or by that. I think that is off the mark. I think the state has given them too much audience, and because of that, now they are being made to cover too much ground. I think the analysis is wrong, because effective therapy can only occur when there is a proper diagnosis. The problem is the structure of the economy, which leads to social reproduction, which is inequality, poverty, and unemployment. Even if we can get rid of all the undocumented foreign nationals, and I'm not saying that people must be allowed to be in the country illegally. Those who are here illegally, we have to send them back where they come from. So if they want to come back, they come back legally. But I don't think that we can paint everyone with the same brush. So the problem is the structure of the economy. Our economy has not been growing the way it should have. Our economy has created a scope for a tiny minority of people to benefit from the neoliberal policies. And we've seen a tiny minority of people using social and political capital in pursuit of personal accumulation, but also the slow pace of service delivery, in particular at local government level, is the cause of the binary between the powerful and the powerless.
My has been quite active on the issue of illegal immigration. Now, obviously, this is not the forum to kind of go deep into March and what we've seen there. But what I'm trying to understand is, what's the hot topic that's going to mobilize young people? Is it to our foreign nationals? And if it is, for me, that scares me a little. But you can respond, Michael.
Yeah, look, I'm going to take a bit of leeway in that discussion because I want to dive in on the subject of illegal immigration. I think the discussion around March and whether their motives and processes are good or bad is not really where I want to dive in. I want to dive in about why it happened. Why was there such an outpouring of discontent? Because regardless of your views on illegal immigration, and I do recognize that my view in this particular platform is probably a minority, is that there was an outpouring of anger for a reason. And that reason is that there are a huge number of South Africans who do not have access to their own economy, who struggle to get into education facilities, who see their mothers having to give birth on the hospital floor because the hospital beds are occupied. And really, that is a long-term problem that South Africa is not entirely there for South Africans. We, as a party, take great issue with the fact that the South African Constitution has gotten us into a position where, coupled with uncontrolled immigration, it says South Africa belongs to all those who live in it. Because now we have a reality that there are millions and millions of people who are in our country illegally, who are accessing our public health facilities, our public education, and it happens at the expense of South African citizens. And I struggle to have this argument on platforms like this because I always find myself talking to people who have the benefits of private medical aid, private education, etc. They're not the people in the public hospitals who are experiencing these challenges, and they don't seem to relate to that kind of challenge. From my point of view, the average South African is experiencing limited access to government resources. Our facilities are overcrowded. Absolutely, government has failed to provide adequately, and I take that 100% on board. But here's the thing. Government's responsibility, as the Prof correctly concluded a moment ago, and I want to agree with him, even if it's not much we will agree on the topic perhaps, is that the role of government is to control how goods and people enter your country and to ensure that people come into your country legally, and when they're here, they obey your laws. There has been a catastrophic failure of our government to ensure that those two principles are adhered to over many, many years, and a catastrophic failure of our government to deal with our neighbors who create political and economic crises on our border that create mass immigration into our country, and we'll deal with them through quiet diplomacy, by way of example. There's got to be a change in this thing, and the public outpouring that we saw in the streets this week is people across our country, young and old, by the way, not just young, saying this can't continue any longer, and our government has failed. And just one last thought, if you want to consider how badly our government has failed in this regard. The South African government spent 600 million rand on policing on the day of that march. 600 million. The total budget that they spend on deportations every year, half that, 300 million. That's the problem, and that has to be turned around.
And Michael, you and I actually are not very far off in our views, and as to the surprise of many, in the sense that it's a government failure problem. We all can agree that it's a government failure problem, right? And I think the nuance in this discussion is that it's perfectly in your realm as a political party to take the position that you are and promise voters, and you did in the 2024 election. You made the issue of immigration central to your campaign, and 500,000 people voted for you, and the rest did not vote for you, right? So that's where I come to this discussion, is that isolationist politics is all over the world. If you know what I mean, like, and we can agree or disagree in terms of whether that's a good approach or not. Approach, and I can vote for you or not vote for you as a South African, right? But it exists in an organized constitutional democracy space where a political party is presenting a set of ideas and proposals, and the electorate can decide whether it wants it or not, right? What worries me, and it links back to the conversation around young people, is that there seems to be an attempt to kind of get a shortcut in a constitutional democracy, right? And then and so we'll take matters in our own hands when it comes to immigration. And so it may suit us now that, okay, it's immigration, right? But what happens when it comes to we dislike the courts? Let's shut down the courts. What happens? You understand? So for me, my entry into this discussion is not the differences we have on orientation about, open borders, closed borders. I'm saying have your position, I have my position, everybody has their positions. And as political parties, you guys get vote, people vote, people react to it or not, right? The EFF had an open borders policy, 9% of the electorate supported them, etc. Right? But I'm saying, what happens now when politics is not the vehicle for change, and it's now saying, you know what, it's brute force, and that's what worries me. I don't know if that nuance is making sense to you.
No, certainly it does. And all around the world, people resort to taking matters into their own hands when they feel like their elected system of government is not dealing with the problem. And, for what it's worth, let me start also by just addressing what I think is the mischaracterization. You use the term isolationist. It is not isolationist to say that people must enter our country legally, and when they're here, they must obey our laws. That is the position of every successful country around the world. If you disbelieve me, it's not a long walk from the Northwest into Botswana. They will teach you about the rule of law if you walk into there without your papers. At the end of the day, we need to have the rule of law in our country. And a huge part of our economic failures is around the chaos we have in terms of the rule of law. And we mustn't be apologetic about that. I also think if you would like to characterize, smaller parties on the subject versus bigger parties, I put it to you this way. The parties that are open borders are getting smaller. The parties that are talking about dealing with our borders are getting bigger. And that is another electoral reality that people are responding to because they are fed up and they are angry. But this is where I advocate for the fact that we believe we hold what we think is the center and rational position on immigration. As the song goes, clowns to the left of me and jokers to the right. So we look at people who say shut off the life support machines of people like Rahima Musa, and I think that's a shocking thing to say. It was detestable and it should be called out for what it was. That is not the right approach. We can't scapegoat people for the failures of our government. We need to put that failure where it belongs, at the foot of our government. And we must be very clear about that. But at the same time, this United States of Africa and this World Cup of immigration that we've got going on in our country is also totally unacceptable. We need a rational middle ground. We try to occupy that ground all the time. And I think we have consistently, because ultimately we think we need to lead South Africans. It's not just about following people down a position of extremism. It's about providing leadership and guiding people to a position that'll be good for our country. And we think the approach we're advocating for is reasonable, it's rational, and it provides a good basis upon which we can have the rule of law in our country. And we can welcome people into our country who come here legally and obey our laws, and we can deport the people that don't follow those steps.
Prof, anything to add? Oh, can't hear you. Muted, Prof. You still muted? The joys of a virtual platform. We still can't hear you. Masego, are you still online?
Yes. I'm online. And I think now I'm in a quite better state now.
Yeah. Okay, right. You take a stab at do you want to take a stab at what you're talking about in
Yeah.
terms of this way, this illegal immigration being central to dissatisfaction, but youth dissatisfaction.
Yeah. If I can just put my weight there, I do agree with what Prof said earlier, that we are backing the wrong issue. I think I agree with what Mr. Michael saying, that countries have their own laws and stuff, but my greatest challenge is that while I agree that sovereign state has a right and the responsibility to enforce its immigration law, South Africa has no exception to that. But my problem is, if we focus on immigration as the problem to our many challenges that we have will be sort of diverting. Our unemployment crisis really it's deeper than that. You know, like Prof was saying, that we have a slow economic growth. We have we need to decentralize the economy. You know, there's so much inequality, there's so much corruption, even inadequacy in job creation. So we cannot really say that foreigners, they are the root cause of everything. I think it's not sufficient to solve the challenges we are facing as young South Africans. For me, even if we chase all the foreigners, whether legal or illegal, we'll still have high unemployment in the country. So I don't really think our solution are really only based on immigration alone. So I think we need to take a broader look at that. So that's my knowledge.
Prof, let's try.
Yeah, human beings have needs, and when their needs are not met, that creates a scope for conflict. I think social conflicts are caused by the failure of addressing human needs. So I think the needs of South Africans, they need to be addressed, and the people that we elect into power, we must be very careful who are those people. So I think people need to think rationally how they vote. But also I think the structure of the economy, we need to alter, I think, the social order and make sure that we have a structure that creates a scope for people to be absorbed into the labor market on a large scale. I think we need to appreciate the fact that there are sections of society who are xenophobic. For instance, if you look at the way people refer to foreign nationals as Ababantu, you know, these people, that is a language of binarism, of us and them, the self and the other, the self and the othering, or the self and the otherness. So it doesn't do us any good to be full of denialism and say that South Africans are generally not xenophobic. That is not true. Xenophobia does embed itself in this country.
Prof,
And
I'm looking at time. Sorry to interrupt you. I just want to bring the conversation back to the elephant in the room, and that is how then can we change, things can change for young people. So I mean, and we had to touch on illegal immigration, because this was a hot topic, and you see political campaigns being formed around it. But the point that I want to get to now is what is the one thing that you can point to that says we can get more people engaged to have a better and more democratic outcome from voting?
Yeah, so I think we need to make the circle bigger. We need to make sure that we have spaces of this nature, have public engagements, raise the levels of political consciousness, but also make sure that we invest in civic education with the hope that young people will vote on a large scale. I don't agree with the withdrawal of young people as a sign of protest, as I indicated, that even if you don't vote, you are going to have a government at the end of the day.
Masego, let's just go to you very quickly. Anything you guys are going to be doing differently as the FF?
Well, thank you very much. I think one of the things we'll do is to continue to encourage young people to vote, and then we'll also make sure that we empower them in terms of like Prof was saying, in terms of civic education, in terms of political education, conscientizing them, understanding that voting alone is not enough, but participating in terms of policy making decisions, in terms of being in councils, you know, all those things, they are important. And thirdly, what we're going to do is that we're going to make sure that we rally behind young people. We're going to support them in anything that they need, economically, educationally. We're going to help them. And I really wanted to expand my answer, but I see that time have left us. But we're going to make sure that we're going to advocate for policies that promote job creations, policies that are going to make sure that entrepreneurship is also one of the things that is going to help young people. And student debt relief, we're still saying is the EFF that young people must go there, they must make their contributions onto how we can make the bill better so that it also helps them to go and find jobs. And we're also going to advocate for skills development, encourage them that their participation is so important. And finally, we need to make sure that there's no bureaucracy between young people in the system. Like I was saying, that this process is where you need to go and register, this processes of them not understanding how government works. So we're going to try and bridge that gap. No, thank you very much, Ms. Hunt. I hope that you understood what I was saying.
Absolutely, and we could speak for another hour. Michael, last step to you. What can I'm saying we, but in your realm, what can you see being done differently to get a different outcome? Maybe with the exception of scuba diving in potholes.
Yeah, don't go there. It's too soon. I don't enjoy the turning South Africa's suffering into a comical experience. I don't think South Africans find it funny that we have potholes of that size. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm going to focus on what I think we need to be doing as a party. From our point of view, one of the things we're going to be doing is really drilling down into what we are doing in the city of Tshwane, along with other political parties and coalition. There, Dr. Ntsikelelo Moya, who is a young South African by South African political standards, in fact, a baby by South African political standards, is delivering the turnaround of the capital city that was literally and by definition bankrupt when she inherited it. And that city is now turning around, notwithstanding the mountains still to go. But the reason why this becomes important is talk is cheap. South Africans are experiencing local government collapse all around them. They need to have political parties who can prove that they can govern. And this idea of governments and parties that can govern being a binary between yellow and blue has got to come to an end. And we're going to be using that story very prominently in our election campaign to demonstrate that if you look more broadly and you give more political parties the chance to lead, you can find phenomenal young people like this who are leading and who are delivering and who are doing exactly what we need most right now, and that's delivering services to places that haven't had them before.
Quinita, this time your sound is off.
Look at me making a rookie mistake at the end. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. The thing I love about South Africa is we can disagree, but have good, constructive conversations in the spirit of the love we have for this country and for the in the spirit of our collective hope for a better future for this country. The fact that at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, we have some 50 people talking about how to solve this problem of youth voter apathy it inspires me as a young person, because I think the more we talk, the better ideas we get, the better ideas we have, the more movement we have. And so thank you, Prof, and to NWU.
And thank you very much for everybody attending. Quinita, thank you very, very much for a wonderful session. Quite, I think you've really put them through the paces, and we much appreciate it. And to our guests that attended today, thank you very much. I hope to call on you again sometime in the future, and much appreciated. We'll keep on talking about the elections, and we'll keep on talking about South Africa because it's important to all of us, especially to us here at the business school. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye-bye.
All right.